My father brought a joy to the world and a legacy of laughter to many, many generations through his work in his movies, through people who were fortunate enough to see him perform on stage, people who saw his television shows.
He was such a special talent. I mean, he was totally unique. There was nobody like Danny.
He's a man who did everything in his profession.
He set the standard. There had been no one with the diversity of talent ever. You know, there were great singers, there were great comics, but there had never been anyone who did everything.
Danny was, in my opinion, a kind of a theatrical renaissance man, certainly.
He was a singer, he was a dancer, he was an actor, he did radio, he did television, he did the stage, he did nightclub appearances, he did stage appearances. He owned a baseball team, he was a fabulous cook, he was a jet pilot, he conducted orchestras.
He owned everything that he did. The songs, the lyrics, the scenes, the business, and had such an incredible sense of body awareness, of physicality, of imagination, of spontaneity, and the energy was inextinguishable.
No, he's a great mover. And we all think, I mean, the average person think, boy, he can really dance. Yes, he could make you feel he could really dance.
Throughout the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, Danny Kaye was one of the most popular and engaging entertainers in the world. But additionally, he was crucial to the support of UNICEF and its work around the world for children.
My father's influence on the entertainment business today is probably very subtle. But if you look back at what his talents were and then look at some of the people who have come after him, Robin Williams, Steve Martin, Billy Crystal, they've never told me they've been directly influenced by my father, but I'm guessing that surely he would have been an influence on their lives.
Danny Kaye is a very interesting phenomenon, I think probably ripe for rediscovery now, because without Danny Kaye and his amazing ability to sing tongue-twister songs, his physical elasticity, his just non-stop inventiveness and acrobatic agility, you know, you would have no Jerry Lewis, you would have no Jonathan Winters, you would have no Steve Martin, you would have no Robin Williams.
Hey, maneuvers!
My father's family was a family of Russian immigrants, and in fact he had 3 brothers, and he was the only brother who was born in America, and he was born in Brooklyn.
Anything is possible. You can be what you want to be if you put your mind to it. Danny did not have a privileged childhood. He became Danny Kaye because he knew the dream was possible.
Danny, of course, was literally and figuratively the kid from Brooklyn, born and bred in Brooklyn, and of course became a major name in New York and the surrounding areas, and of course then went on to Hollywood. But these weren't the only places where Danny made his impact, and maybe we can even take a look at some of those other places. This is where it all started, when the kid from Brooklyn was brought into the world. That's where we are, right here, in the East New York section. Yes, Jacob and Clara Kaminsky gave birth to a little boy who would become known to the world as Danny Kaye.
He went to high school until a certain age level, and then he dropped out because he used to go into the principal's office. He hated school, and he would pretend he was going to throw up, and the principal would say, well, you can just leave.
Good old 149, hooray for 149. Well, that's it. That's the school song for good old PS 149, renamed the Danny Kaye School in honor of probably one of its most famous Brooklyn attendees. Danny Kaye spent his early days here performing and making funny faces in the schoolyard with his friend Louis Eisen. They went on, of course, as classmates to perform just as much at Thomas Jefferson High School in Brooklyn, and Danny followed his path, taking his theatrical cue as he continued to perform in the Catskill Mountains and went on to further fame.
He did a number of things to arrive at his career. He really never had any formation. He didn't have acting lessons, singing lessons, dancing lessons, but he worked in the Catskills as a tummeler, and a tummeler meant somebody who kind of got the action going. So if it was raining, the owner got very upset, went into my father's room and said, "You better come out and get everybody excited," kind of like an opening act for somebody. And then he went on tour to the Far East, and that's where he learned how to use his hands a lot, because in Japan and China, obviously they didn't speak English, so he communicated with his hands, and a lot of the, it sort of sounds like gobbledygook double talk with a few of the real words thrown in. He learned how to communicate somehow without words to an audience who didn't speak English.
Hey, to get the get say, we'll get the game, the mailman, to get say,
My parents were an amazing professional combination. Surely they would have become something without each other, but together they were an incredible team. And they met when my father was practicing for a play on Broadway, and my mother was the rehearsal pianist. Eventually, my mother wrote a lot of his material. She used to say that she had radar for what he could do. She was sort of prescient and could tell what material he could do well even before he knew he was going to be great at it. I think the thing that strikes me most about my father at White Christmas is his dancing. The dance scene with Vera Ellen. Just every time I see it, I can't believe how graceful he is, how effortless it is, how elegant he is.
White Christmas is almost like a Danny Kaye's greatest hits up until that time. He gets to sing, and he sings wonderfully in the film. He gets to dance, which was incredibly impressive. His moves, his body, I mean, I think at peak performance at that time.
It's a very understated performance from Kaye, and quite studied and successful in that. When he and Vera Ellen dance along the seascape on that great patio. Danny Kaye was not a dancer of the caliber of Fred Astaire. At least he was not perceived as such. Clearly, he can carry a dance. He is so physically nimble. He's so graceful that he's completely at home.
Number one, Danny Kaye is not a trained dancer. He's a physical comedian who's not afraid to try it. He can replicate things. That's like why in the choreography number, he's much better with all of those kind of, clown-like movements. To be graceful, you need the training to hold your body at a certain place. So I admire what he does in it.
He was always an enchanting performer to watch, and it's, I guess, one of his biggest successes.
Danny Kaye was not cast in White Christmas at the beginning. It was someone else. They had another person in mind, Donald O'Connor. And look at the chemistry that came out of that.
In the era that was made, they wanted like a buddy movie. I mean, Hope and Crosby had done a lot of things together. The Crosby-Danny was a very good combination because you had two compatible singing stars. Danny then, at that era, was a very big movie star. I mean, he did everything. I mean, he became the biggest thing on television. He was the biggest thing in movies in the early part of his career. And he was the biggest thing on the stage. You can't do more than that. He had all three of them.
You remember now, Nook of the North here.
And so our flight of fancy continues, and where do we wind up most appropriately but here at the Danny Kaye Visitors Center, just a shtick and a stone from the United Nations. And well, what can we say about Danny Kaye and UNICEF? Well, it was UNICEF, the organization that Danny Kaye did so much for, raising millions of dollars for the impoverished organization and making them known worldwide. But more importantly, he became the face of UNICEF, and he brought smiles to the faces of millions of children around the world.
He was the first celebrity spokesperson for UNICEF, and actually, in my view, was a role model for everybody that followed, from Audrey Hepburn to Angelina Jolie to George Clooney.
Danny Kaye's involvement with UNICEF dates back to 1953. In 1953, Danny Kaye was one of the biggest stars in the world. One day, he happened to be flying transatlantically from London to New York.
The story is that he met the representative from UNICEF on a plane, and they started talking, and my father thought it was a great idea to help the world's children. And he was a natural for working with UNICEF when you think about his ability to communicate with people who don't speak any English.
Cantare la canzone.
Danny's thing with children, I mean, he really put UNICEF on the map. People understood more about what UNICEF was because of Danny.
Danny Kaye was a universally popular entertainer. He could transcend language barriers with his smile, with his eyes, with his magnetism. He was a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador for 33 years and traveled all over the world repeatedly, engaging children, engaging governments, engaging supporters.
When he got involved with UNICEF, I think that was really that was really in his heart. You know, he made people so aware of UNICEF, and he was very proud to be a part of that.
I think one of his great gifts in working with children was he wasn't afraid to be one of them. He wasn't afraid to get down on the floor, roll around, make funny noises, play ball with them. He could relate to children, I wouldn't say on their level, but a sense of freedom that he had, lack of embarrassment, lack of inhibition, to just kind of have fun and be silly. And I think this was a great help in his relating to children.
No more? No. No more. No. No more. No.
In 1954, Danny Kaye was named an ambassador at large for UNICEF, and that same year he traveled around the world to 4 different countries with a film crew. The resultant film was called Assignment Children, which is a 19-minute documentary, I believe was produced by Paramount. It was subsequently seen by over 100 million people around the world and really brought UNICEF to the forefront of public attention.
Danny Kaye brought joy to the world by, first of all, entertaining people from one end of the world to the other, and I think that evolved into him going to the next generation and to children.
I may be paraphrasing a little bit, but Danny once said that life is a great big canvas, and so go out and throw as much paint on it as you can. And I think that's really the way his life was. He took great advantage, felt that he had a huge gift to offer, and he kept on giving, and he still keeps giving. And what a wonderful legacy that we all have as a result of that.
I can't quite think of anybody who you could say, well, he's exactly like Danny Kaye was. And I think that's his uniqueness. And my wish is that all of these many talents would continue to, in his work certainly, bring joy and laughter and fun to people, and that his humanitarian work would continue to influence a whole new generation of people.
Through the air they keep flying like a duck that is dying. Instead of dance, it's chorus.